Welcome to Blackpool. I was going to say it was a damp, drizzly morning, but as I've walked in just now, the sun's come out, which is quite amazing, really, because this is about the best weather I've ever seen here for the Luxury Soul Weekender. And having lived in Blackpool for an awful long time, I know what it's generally like on a January. And I'm joined today by Richard Searling and Ian Tolley and also Ralph T to chat about the Luxury Soul Weekender in its 20th year, which is quite an achievement, fellas, I have to say.
Yeah.
I can't believe it.
Weather aside, this is the really interesting thing, is there's 1,001 reasons why this weekender should fail.
Yeah,
Because first of all, it's the first weekend after Christmas and the New Year. And secondly, it's in Blackpool, it's miles away from anywhere. And thirdly, the weather's always horrible. So why is it so successful? Let's start with you, Richard.
I think it benefited in the early days, having the radio exposure that we got from Jazz FM. There's no doubt about it. In fact, I can remember one of the presenters there on the first evening after it had gone on sale saying, this is going to be a winner. We've done 81 rooms today after the ads had started. And now, subsequently, we do a full complement of every room in the hotel in a day in later years. But that at the time was great. And for many years, a lot of my associates have said, wouldn't it be great to have somewhere where we could go in couples, a slightly older Luther Vandrossy type crowd? It was never really aimed at the what you would call the all-nighter or Northern Soul crowd. It was always more a sophisticated contemporary crowd. Wouldn't it be great to have somewhere like that? And I think the fact that we got the whole hotel rather than just a couple of rooms and the general public were in here as well from day one, I think that helped. Jazz FM, no doubt about it, with their pull and their pull in getting our first artist, who I think I'm right in saying was Dennis Taylor, and Howard Johnson came in as well, didn't he, with another chap? Howard Johnson and somebody else.
It was.
They did an album together.
It was Nathan that passed away first year.
Right, that's not the person I'm thinking about. It's somebody else. But anyway, we had the live acts. We had a great one. It doesn't clash with anything else on the Soul calendar, and people see it, I think, as a nice way of starting off a new year, something to look forward to in what, as you say, Mike, is a traditionally very sort of, people are looking at the bank statements and feeling bad about things in January. So I think we're an antidote to that.
I think that's a very good answer. And I know certainly from my own experiences of being in the Northwest for a good period of time and seeing it in its incarnation before you got to this, with artists coming in and so on, and thinking, wow, this is pretty good. I don't know how they're doing this, It's and then obviously things spread. You went to Birmingham as well and did some stuff there. We'll talk about that in a little while. But I just wanted to get a bit of background on the three of you first of all. So Richard, we'll get to you in a minute because you and I have known each other since the 80s. So, but Ralph T, I mean, how did you get involved in this? Because I know that I met you through Richard. So.
Yes, indeed. Well, I mean, Richard and I go right back to the early 80s. I used to have a soul music magazine called Groove Weekly, which I just actually did a 40th anniversary reissue.
I saw that.
That goes back to 1981, which is the year I first met Richard. And then Richard and I were in touch through the Blues and Soul years. I had another magazine that Morgan Kahn used to publish called Street Scene, where Richard was a contributor. And then Richard and John Anderson originally started Expansion Records. And a year after that, so 1987, was when Richard and John Anderson approached me about becoming a part of Expansion. And ultimately, it became just Richard and I. And at that point is when Ian Tolley, who was working at the Hilton at the time, approached Jazz FM and asked about doing something together. And we all knew each other, so that's kind of we already had that existing relationship.
So Ian, you were working for Hilton, in Birmingham, right?
No, I did 4 years on the cruise ships. Came back in 2001. Started work here as in Blackpool, based in Blackpool, as the special events and entertainments manager. So my remit ran from Birmingham up to Glasgow. And I was tasked with trying to find some sort of event. So I phoned round and, had a little bit of a look and got invited to a few local things because there was quite a small collection of Northern Soul events that were already existing in Blackpool, and wanted something different. So the first person that had came up on investigation was the name of Richard Searling. First person I phoned, yes, fine, no problem. We've got a togetherness at Carla Gran. So I went to meet Richard there. And honestly, I think I said this to you. I says, yeah, it's just not the sort of thing that, you know, that I'm looking for. But then went to King George's Hall, and that's when it was Beverly Brown was live act on that one. Now, weirdly, Beverly Brown sang on Dennis Taylor's album, who performed on the first year. I've got that right. Look at that. Nostalgia. Look at that. Because it was Peter and Santosh, wasn't it, with Dome Records?
That's right.
So, but as soon as I stood at the back of the room, that was the vibe that I was looking for. And I think you guys picked the day. I just said, look, this is the event. You can have the whole hotel. This is the sort of concept. And you went, right, well, we're going to go for the first week in January. And I went, what?
Yeah. I remember having the meeting with you. It must have been 2002 then.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we had the meeting in the lounge.
Yeah, with Simon.
And Liz.
Yeah.
And I remember looking at the dance floor, because it was down the dance floor for whatever reason. I thought, what a fantastic room this is going to be for playing the sort of Anita Baker type groove, you know. And I remember Liz saying something at the time. She said, you know, if we get it right, we'll have Aretha Franklin here in 15, 20 years.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, I
because
remember
that was.
that.
But of course, it doesn't hold those numbers. But you know, the great thing about this,
You did get Ashford and Simpson and Bobby Womack.
we
though.
did.
Yeah, pretty close.
We'll come on. We'll come on to that. And that's a good point. I think the venue is just a really nice size, isn't it? The Blackpool event, it benefits from having those 4 rooms that we can put different flavours of music in, and then you've got that fantastic room for the live acts. But meeting Ian was a real, you know, I think without you being the catalyst and that night at the King George's Hall in Blackburn, then we might never have got it together. But I can't understate or underestimate the strength of the radio station, because Blackburn was all about the radio station as well.
Yeah.
I mean, that radio station gave us 1,600 people every other month for, I don't know, 15 years or something. It was incredible. But
it was Red Rose before that, though. Don't forget.
it was Red Rose.
Yeah.
You're right. I remember going there with the sales lady from Red Rose, and we started that up. I think that must have been the 80s.
Late 80s, early 90s, when I was still at Red Rose then,
Yeah.
so you were there. And because the first radio show I ever did, by the way, was Depping for him.
Yeah.
It was the first time I ever did a radio show.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So going all the way back to then, in the late 80s, I remember hearing these brilliant ads on the air with you voicing them with Jeffrey Osborne, and on the background, Gene Rice music and all of this kind of stuff. You think, wow, that is an event I want to go to, right? So it's funny, really, that you're actually a catalyst or a conduit for a lot of things. Because when I went to Jazz FM, you were the first person I rang, and I went, I need to get some guys together. And you're going, you must speak to Ralph T. You've got to speak to Peter Young. Yeah. And I said, what about you? You went, I can't, because I'm doing Smooth at the time, or whatever it was you were doing. Smooth, wasn't it?
That's right. Yes, I was.
So so you seem to open a lot of doors to a lot of things.
Well, that's nice to know. It's nice to know. As somebody said to me yesterday, because they were talking about new music, and me and new music, since I left Smooth in 2009, I haven't really gone down that road, because I'm quite competitive on, I've got to have this first and one thing and another. I wanted to move right away from it. But when I was on that radio show, I wanted to have things first. Then suddenly I wasn't bothered at all. I started to look backwards. But this guy said to me, Richard, you're still in the game. And I thought that was quite nice. And I am sort of still in the game, but in a different sort of role now, really.
And the role you play here in terms of DJing is, it's very much a back step now, isn't it? You allow
absolutely
the talent to do
in
that.
fact, I'm now relegated to the soul desk, as we call it. Yeah, the smiling face of the soul desk, but not always.
I remember the first years; they were
He has got
brilliant.
some
They were
stories.
brilliant. Yeah, the stories there. Good grief.
Well, look, it's in its 20th year now, but the pandemic must have caused absolute chaos. You must have thought, oh my God, we're never going to come back to this at all. How did that affect everybody?
It hurt, and it really did. But what was spectacular, and it was so last minute, and we did like that virtual luxury soul weekend, which you were part of, which was fantastic. And Chris Box, John Jules, Biggs was on there, Paul Clifford, and it was, yes, of course, it's not going to be the same, but something was on, and it was able to. I think the main part of Luxury Soul Weekender, and someone said to me yesterday, how's it gone for 20 years? How's it, grown? And it's the fastest selling event that the Hilton or now this place has got. And I think it's because of the understanding that us three have, because it's a case of, that's Ralph and that's Richard, or Ian sorts that out, or whatever. We don't fall out as well. We always have a laugh, doing it. And it's passion. And I think that's the main thing that we have. We're good pals, pick up the phone and... Yeah. And I think that's the key thing, but it's the loyalty of the customers that keep on coming back, and the constructive criticisms that they come with, and we listen to everything that's said to us, and we just try and sort of exceed expectations year in, year out.
Can we talk about those criticisms for a second? Is that
Yeah.
all right?
Yeah.
Because obviously,
No comment.
when the Hilton sold this particular hotel that we're in at the moment to Britannia, that first year, it was a bit odd. The service levels seem to have dropped considerably. There was an awful lot of very unhappy customers queuing up for hours at the desk to make complaints and so on. And was there a point, do you think, I'll ask you, Ralph, because you've been quite quiet so far, but was there a point where you thought, actually, we've got to find somewhere else, because if we don't, this event won't happen next year?
Not at all. I think there's so much goodwill towards this actual building as much as everything else,
right,
that people want to come here. So it wasn't like we were looking for somewhere else to take it. And even last year, we were talking about COVID just before. It was such a close shave last year, with Boris still in position on the Tuesday before the event, possibly saying, sorry, we're all going back into lockdown. We didn't know until 48 hours before the event actually took place whether it was actually going to happen. Yet still, it did happen and everyone was here. But equally, if we couldn't have done it, people would have just been fine to just look forward to coming the following year. It wouldn't have been held against us in any way. So it's all worked out perfectly.
Yeah. So, I mean, was it a logistical nightmare when it changed over at all?
So, the good thing about it, okay, so it's never going to be the Hilton. Their standards were always good, but the great thing about it, we have got some key personnel that have been here since I was here back in 2001. Without those key personnel, it would have been very tough. But as Ralph said, it's the building, it's the rooms, it's the vibe that we get, and it is Blackpool. And those key personnel from the following year after the takeover really stepped it up. We had meetings with them and we said, look, this has got to be picked up, and they delivered, and they have done, and there's always going to be, in a food and beverage, an event establishment, an event scenario, there's always going to be things that can be better. And that's what, we work very closely with the operations staff here at the Grand, and, they are striving to exceed expectations.
So does this event just arrive on the calendar in January, or does it take a 12 months to plan it? I mean, how does it, are you working on next year's now?
Yeah, I'm looking at Ralph as I'm saying this, because Ralph has probably the most arduous of all the tasks, which is the identification and then the booking of acts.
I was going to ask you about your individual roles, actually. So, it's interesting to know this, because people see Ralph and yourself, Richard, as front-facing. Ian, probably, because you're in charge of operations, effectively.
That's right.
It's. I've noticed your role has become more predominant and more outward facing over the years. This is my 13th one here now, and it took me until about 6 years ago for you to give me a nudge and go, you do know I'm involved in this, don't you? Because I used to go on the stage and thank Richard and thank Ralph. Never said anything about you at all. And he'd give me a little dig in the ribs one year, and I thought, oh shit.
Ian handles the social media side of things as well.
I noticed you've come out of yourself a lot.
Yeah, and that wasn't, by choice. It wasn't done on purpose. It was just a case of, it's just developed. It's just evolved.
So who does what then in this little trinity of individuals, if you like? Who does what?
Well, Ian, as you say, is operations, and Ian's knowledge of how hotels work is invaluable. So he sees problems before we would see them and solves them where we probably couldn't do. And the social media side of things as well. We decided, rather than all three of us sort of having a sort of slapdash approach and all posting stuff which could be conflicting and not a clear message, Ian handles that. So Ian listens to what the response coming in is and answers a lot of stuff privately, but also posts out all the things people need to know as we move through. As you say, the clock's already ticking for next year, which will obviously be the same weekend in January.
So that is happening then. Let's quash this rumour straight away,
Yeah,
because
I
there
mean,
is a rumour flying around
yeah.
at the moment that it's not going to happen next
That's
year.
kind of weird how that one started.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the first time it started, whether that's wishful thinking on certain people's behalf or whether people are genuinely worried and can't believe that we're able to keep bringing this fantastic thing year in, year out and think that we're eventually going to run out of steam. No, that's absolutely not the case, I can assure you.
Yeah, it's the 5th, 6th and 7th of January 2024.
It is. So you know, myself and Ralph have already started talking about, you know, the entertainment side of things, not the DJs. The DJs tends to be slightly easier, and we've got a very settled team. Not that I'm being sort of resting on laurels, but I do believe that the team we've got is absolutely fantastic. It's been honed over the years, and a lot of the original team are still with us, and they're with us because they're bloody good DJs and the crowd love them.
Yeah.
But you know, myself and Ralph will talk about acts, and then you've got the logistics. I mean, you know, American acts now, bringing them in, and it's fraught with problems on several fronts. The airlines still haven't got their act together, and artists aren't getting any younger, and then the right sort of artist to meet the needs of the demographic that we now attract, which has changed.
Yeah.
It's more of a sort of, do I say urban? Do I say an urban audience? Sort of more of an R&B.
You can say that. Yeah. It is that.
Yeah, you're not going to get away with somebody singing an hour of ballads anymore in that main ballroom.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because the year that I'm just trying to see what year it was now. Hang on a minute. Let me just have a quick look. So this was 2011. So
it's not going to be a quiz, is it?
No. Michael Henderson, Gene Khan, Cool Million doing a DJ set and so on, and Al Olive, yeah. But Gene was her usual brilliant self, and she's appeared here a few times.
Yeah.
In fact, actually, I think last time I was in this room, I was interviewing Michael and Gene.
Yeah.
So, but she was fantastic. Michael came on; he was an amazing performer, but his show was very mellow in its tone. And people tend to lose interest in that room if that's the case. They need an artist with a lot of energy, don't
it's
they?
a standing audience in there.
Yeah.
So I think if it was seated, it'd be slightly different. But we don't want that because we wouldn't get as many in.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. If there's a comfort break required and a ballad comes on, then maybe that's the time. And once one starts moving, it's almost a herd mentality.
Yeah.
But yeah, Michael Henderson, it's such an evocative artist to have brought him in here, and because he's another one, like
Kashif as well, yeah.
no longer with us, and Nick Ashford. Thank goodness we've done what we've done when we had the chance to do it, and they've been successful.
Dare I mention Brexit at all? And I mean, does that affect the way that you book artists now when they're coming to Europe and so on? Do you find the UK is a bit more isolated?
Actually, not, because we're dealing with artists in America, so
Right.
that side of things hasn't.
Apart from the exchange rate, of course, which is an absolute disgrace. It was
Yes.
151 beforehand, and now it's 120.
And that's the other thing, actually. Talking of cost of living for a minute, because I'd mentioned earlier on about there's 1,000,001 reasons why this weekend shouldn't work straight after Christmas, and the cost of living is right up there in that at the minute because people are counting every single penny they've got. And I know myself from working at various different events around the country and on the continent that numbers are down in terms of events and so on. So how do you manage to put on an elite event? And let's face it, that's what this is, because there are many that are not. They pop up in crappy hotels or on caravan parks and so on and so forth, but you're here doing an elite event at the beginning of the year when people have just spent all of their money at Christmas, and you still manage to keep coming back. So how do you keep it?
It's become part of people's calendar, though.
It has, but how do you make it? How do you keep it cost effective? Is what I'm trying to very inarticulately say. Because at the moment, while every penny counts, even if it's part of my calendar, if I can't afford it, I still can't come. Does that make sense?
It does, but I think people prioritise this weekend as extremely important to them. Not certain people, our audience particularly. They have Christmas, family, New Year, family. This weekend is about their friends, and each year it's that third part of that festive season that people make a point of coming to. Even if they can't really afford it, they'll find the money, they'll put money aside for this, and I think we're very lucky to have those.
It's a lot of hard work as well with regards to the costs, and we spoke about this years and years ago. It's probably in the 5th year that we were adamant that it wouldn't go over a certain amount, and I remember that, and that was before the cost of living. This was going back the 5th year into it, and I do remember that, and we've always been conscious of that. But there's a lot of people that do a lot of work. We're very, very blessed with regards to how many people help us as part of the Luxury Soul Weekender team.
Yeah, let's mention Adrienne, for instance, who does the room dressing. She's an absolute
and
star.
Intrac, Intrac have been with us near enough since day one, haven't they? Dean and Sid.
And John before them.
Exactly,
He's not with us anymore,
of course.
But there are still limits to what we can afford in terms of, say, artists.
Yes.
That people say, oh, why don't you have this person on? Why don't you have that person on? It's like, why don't you have Stevie Wonder on? It's like, well, obviously, we're never going to be able to stretch to Stevie Wonder. And people won't necessarily know how much an artist costs, which is why we can't have certain artists. So there are limits. It is within a budget, and we do everything still.
If I was still working at the Hilton, we could have got someone like that, because I could have got that pass through in Birmingham, couldn't I? Because if I was still there, Birmingham would have still been a massive factor to us.
Yeah.
It was only because, obviously, I moved on. Yeah. And then the goalposts moved, didn't they?
That's right.
Let's talk about some of the artists, because let's get to the show busy stuff. Because let me talk about Eric Benet for a minute, because that was a seat of your pants one, that one, wasn't it? So I was at Jazz FM at the time, and I remember people queuing up at the reception in Birmingham. Do you remember?
I do indeed.
And the rooms hadn't been paid for, so like people were turning up to go in there, and the money hadn't been transferred into the account to the Hilton at the very last second. And it was just before 5 o'clock when this money, when Alistair Mackenzie at Jazz FM shifted all the money across so that the rooms could get paid for, so we could let people in. That event very nearly didn't happen.
And they were coming to Richard and I and Ian saying, why can't we check in? Because they're thinking it's down to us.
Yeah.
The hotel side of things, the bookings, is not down to us. But in that case, with Jazz FM's involvement on the Eric Benet show, which was particularly expensive because he wanted a lot of money to come, and it was Jazz FM involvement to say, look, we'll help you out with that. They were ultimately responsible in that particular one-off case event. But I remember being on the phone myself to Alistair Mackenzie at Jazz FM, begging for him to pay that money. And fortunately, he was able to do it just in time to avoid too many.
Yeah, I remember because I was getting it from the
complaints.
other side. You were getting it from that side. I was getting it from the Jazz FM side at the time. But I mean, that was a great event. But I remember it was fraught with disaster right from the start. That event
because of the booking system,
and also the volcano as well, if you remember. Because Eric was supposed to be in Europe at first, and then he was flying in from Japan. So that knackered all the costs up. All the airline costs went up because he was working elsewhere at the time. So, I remember actually sat in a budget meeting afterwards there and looking at how much money we hadn't made out of it, because of that one. But I have to say, it was a bloody great show. That he was brilliant that night. And I think that in itself goes back to what you were saying earlier about how the shape of the Weekender has changed with regard to the artists and the style of music. Does that make sense? Because he's the prime example of the next generation.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
he was great after as well.
Oh, he was brilliant.
He was brilliant after. He came round
hours
in the lounge and sat with people, and it's a tick box in my opinion. I mean, obviously Ralph and Richard deal with all the entertainment side of things and booking of the acts. But I look for that, and seeing our guests, sitting down with him, dancing with him, having a drink, it was fantastic.
Birmingham, I loved Birmingham, I have to say. There's never when I go to these events now, there's never a weekend goes by when somebody says, why don't you do it in Birmingham anymore?
Yeah, we get that.
You get it a lot, do you?
Yeah,
we do.
Right, well, let me ask you that question then. Why don't you do it in Birmingham anymore?
I'll answer it straight away. It's not never say never. It all depends on. It all stopped when their reservations went. Here, when you phone up, you get somebody at Blackpool in the reservations team that knows at the hotel inside and out, that tells you everything about the rooms, and it's established. At Birmingham, you phone up a central reservations that could be in Tampa Bay. They know nothing about the rooms. They know nothing about it. It's a Hilton-owned hotel, the Metropole. The rooms are amazing, and that's why I love Birmingham. And the hotel is amazing. And I'll just say the very first one in Birmingham, when we took that there, that was Incognito Royers, Frank McComb.
Yeah.
We spoke about it the other day.
Yeah, we did,
That was it was like a Dome Records showcase, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Really,
that lounge bar, the famous lounge bar, from 6 o'clock at night on the Saturday till 6 o'clock in the morning, has a record-breaking amount of money behind that bar, and it's never been beat
Oh,
since.
has it not? Right.
Wow.
It was just, and that was the vibe. The lounge, the pavilion, all the rooms, food it was everything that you'd expect at
Yeah.
Hilton.
Yeah.
Just a great venue.
Yeah, and that would be that'd be 20 years next year, by the way. So Birmingham celebrates, on paper at least, its 20th anniversary, 20 years on from that very first one in 2024.
Interesting.
And,
Maybe we should think about it.
well, maybe you should. I mean, I see Ralph there because I know Ralph likes Birmingham as well.
I love Birmingham. One of the main obstacles was that call centre situation because they were given allocations of rooms they could sell, and it wasn't that many. So if it was like 5 or 10 rooms could sell at each call centre, once those 10 were gone, the people at the end of the line were being told that the event was sold out and wouldn't book. And that was a huge problem. And that would be one we'd have to look at again if we ever thought of going back
we
there.
couldn't work that way again.
It's the exclusivity, because obviously to go in, you've got to have that massive 100% confidence to say, right, we're going to take over the whole hotel. We couldn't do that.
No.
We can't take that sort of gamble
rooms.
because it's a huge hotel.
Yeah.
Whereas here we can, and we're confident with that. And like I says, it sells out within a day.
Yeah.
You got the risk at Birmingham of, if we hadn't sold enough rooms, then putting in a wedding.
Now that happened,
Which they
didn't it?
did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
other events.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Eric Benet, there was a wedding
Yeah,
there
that's
that
right.
day.
And the bride and groom were dancing with him in the
exactly,
lounge.
in the lounge. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
They were all dressed in their finery, weren't they?
And he had airline
Birmingham's where the
pilots
stories
staying
are.
Yeah,
where
it's
things happen.
right,
It
that's
really
right.
is.
So, I mean,
That's
tell us
right.
about Bobby Womack, because,
Oh, my God.
taking Bobby Womack
Yeah.
to Birmingham at a luxury soul weekender.
Yeah.
The geezer's on tour in the UK, and you've extricated him from his tour and
Yeah.
put him on this event. I mean, what was that like? Having, because he was, I don't know what you can. There are no words for Bobby Womack, really.
great.
He's indescribable,
So great, yeah.
brilliant, But
Well, he didn't do How Can You Break My Heart, and I remember kicking off with his manager after.
Oh, really?
Because I'd specifically asked for that to happen, but other than that, it was a fantastic show, minus an encore, I seem to remember. He went off and didn't come back on again.
No, 'cause-
Now, I don't know whether there's something else going on that we
It was.
yeah.
that we don't know about, but I think maybe there's a bit of tension somewhere there. Not with us, of course, but I remember his manager was an Irish guy, really nice Irish guy, David, wasn't he?
Yeah.
But yeah, it was great to have him on at Birmingham. It was fantastic with Ashford and Simpson. When you look back and think how many people were in the room, Ralph, 400, something like that.
I know.
To watch one of the greatest shows ever.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, Birmingham, there are some fantastic things happen there, but we never really, I think, maximised the numbers of people, and I don't know why that would be, whether it would be any different now, because maybe our demographic is more from the south of England than it is from the northwest,
Yeah.
which it is. There's more people coming from the south. Maybe Birmingham would be, I wouldn't say better supported, because they were all great,
Yes.
and they were all busy enough, but they should have been busier.
Yeah,
you know.
I always thought that was a bit odd, really. I mean, maybe it was the timing because it was in May.
Maybe. Yeah,
I don't
possibly.
know, but I'm not going to let Ian, we're not going to rob Ian of his opportunity to tell his Bobby Womack
Oh,
story.
can I say it? Can I dare I
Well, I
say
think
it?
you can.
So listen, tell it. Look, it's
So-
a long
so-
time
so
ago,
what-
and Bobby's
so
not with us
obviously,
now.
I mean, some of the artists that come over, I don't know, all the relationships with Ralph and Richard, I just look after them and make sure that everything, any requests or anything like that, are sorted out. And obviously, after the concert, I'm waiting for him, and then led him up to the room with his wife.
Yes.
Opened the suite door for them, and within 2 seconds then watched a vase being thrown, hitting a door. I'm there with my mouth open, and he just turns around to me and just says, "Please don't go too far." And then the door shut, and I was like, do I stand outside the
Yeah.
door?
Oh,
What do I
God.
do? You know what I mean? Because that's where it all stemmed from. But I must move on. He did the Manchester Apollo the
Yes,
next
he
day.
did. He did.
And I went down, and it was amazing.
You were on the tour bus, didn't you?
Yes, I did, yeah. And I can't remember much after the concert.
Right.
'Cause I got it. But on that Bobby Womack night in the lounge, that's when that impromptu sort of jamming session went on with his
Yeah.
percussionist.
Yeah.
And
was a
his
Sunday night, was it?
his MD jumped on the grand piano in the lounge. And I think it was before videos were available on mobile phones, which I'm glad about.
yeah.
We spoke about this because Judith was there. Were you there as well? When there was there was so many people there, and just got witness. And percussionist turned up a champagne bucket upside down, put it in between his legs, and started playing it. It was just incredible.
And actually, you say Impromptu. I mean, Impromptu were actually on that gig, weren't they?
That was a
And,
Sunday.
They were.
and
They were
Snowboy as well, yeah.
And they were on Expansion Records.
Yeah.
Expansion Records is also a big part of this event.
Sponsor.
But that doesn't necessarily mean we put everyone on Expansion, on the gigs. And when we do choose the artists we want to work with, one of the challenges is which songs do they do? You mentioned Bobby Womack, and he was determined to do his show, his American show, his songs. That was it. And it is a challenge for me sometimes to say to an artist, look, this audience, they're really going to go mad if you do this. And often they don't listen. They think, well, they want to do their American show. So at the first time Bobby Womack came, well, it's the only time he's been for our event, he wanted to do his American show, and that, there were songs that got missed, but later on he did another event for
Yes, he
Richard,
did, in
and he did
Blackburn.
exactly the songs.
Yeah.
It would have been great for him to do it Luxury Soul, but
Yeah.
still having him at the event at all
Yeah.
was amazing.
I think it's important as well. Ralph does a lot of work with the musicians, the UK band. You put that together, don't you, with
Yeah.
Lonnie?
Yeah.
And we've got a good set of musicians now that learn those songs. So Ralph will agree the songs with an artist. So Alton McLean will know which are the most popular of her songs for the show tonight.
Exactly.
And you get the band 3 months up front, the heads up with exactly what the song keys are and the arrangements, and they're working in the background. So that's all part of that sort of duck's legs underwater process, if you will.
Alternatively, an artist may say, we'd rather not do it. Actually, if I say we'd like this, they say, well, kindly, no, that's not what we do. We want to do our own show. Then we elect not to.
You don't turn around and say we're not going to book you then.
I think
Oh, we
if they
do.
want
Yeah.
to
You
bring-
do, yeah.
We
Oh,
do.
right, okay.
If they want to bring their own musicians in or want to fly business, first class or whatever, then they can be deal breakers.
Yeah.
And we've had that. And you can't blame the artists
Well,
if
no.
that's what they used to.
And you can't
If
blame
it's-
yourselves either, because
No, because
margins
the
we've
ticket
discussed
price-
already. Margins are thin, and
Yeah, the price would go up by 25%
Exactly.
overnight.
Yeah, we don't want to do that
No.
to our loyal guests.
No.
So
Ashford and Simpson
Yeah.
did absolutely everything we wanted, and at a price we could afford for a number of different reasons. First of all, they'd had a daughter who was just of an age where she'd never been to the UK. And one of the reasons they agreed to a sort of a fee they wouldn't ordinarily accept, they agreed to come because they wanted to bring their daughter to the UK. And then with regard to the songs, they were happy to do all the selections, including this big Collins and Collins.
Top of the Stairs.
There's a Collins and Collins version of Top of the Stairs, which is better, we all think, than the original Ashford and Simpson version. And they agreed to do the Collins and Collins version of that
Right.
song with the UK band, and the reaction to that. Do you remember? Even the reaction of Ashford and Simpson on the stage, they could not believe what they
No,
were
it was fantastic.
witnessing.
And they talked about the early years at Motown, meeting Berry Gordy, all that. It was just, as you said, it's a pity we didn't really film it now, thinking about it. But,
Well, I did attempt at one point to try and film some of these events. The one I did film was the Gene Kahn and Friends. So it was Gene Kahn, Billy Paul, Bunny Sigler, Dexter Wansel. But it was something I'm not going to really want to repeat again. It was just fraught with problems. First of all, you've got the sound is for the audience. It's not for a DVD, a music video. And then you've got all the contractual sides and dealing with all of that. And it's not. And when I started it, incidentally, they're doing the DVD. People were buying music DVDs. It's before mobile phones and all that. And I thought, if we don't capture, like Dexter Wansel, for example, doing Live on Mars, and I don't have that footage, it's never going to exist because no one else is going to do it. Yeah. So I was quite keen at that time. You had the market for music DVDs. You had these artists coming over that may not come over again. Let's do it. But then by the time the Gene Kahn and Friends DVD was finished, the market dropped out of music DVDs. People weren't buying them. I actually we lost a couple of quid. We won't go into that. I'm still glad I do it. I just won't do it again.
You can't always look at these things on an individual basis. You have to look at it as an ongoing thing, don't you? So, you may have an extraordinary successful year this year and a less successful one next year, or some, so you have to be a bit more global in the way you think about stuff, don't you, really? So you say you lost a couple of quid, but
That's
you might have made it up again later on, so... So I think that's probably a more circumspect way of looking at it.
Well, it just so happens that there is an unsung program on Gene Khan. You know, the series
yes, I've seen
of
that.
programs in America on artists. And they did actually license a little bit of the DVD.
Cool.
Oh, did they? Well, there you go.
I never expected that. But so there, as you say, further down the line, things might happen.
Some of these artists, listen, I mean, you know, we're going to have to wrap it up soon, but I mean, just looking through this list, I mean, God, it's like a who's who of soul music. This is incredible, really. These are like all your favourite singers ever. Right, you sit down and you say, okay, well, I bought records by all of these people, and then all of a sudden, we're booking them to come and play. You know, Glenn Jones, Howard Hewitt, Phil Perry, Lenny Williams. Wow, you know, I mean, look at these artists here. Adriana Evans Mesa, I've seen her a few times, and you know, Ledisi. I mean, another good example actually of what you were saying earlier on about a younger generation of artists, and you booked Ledisi in 2006.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
You know, so that's getting on for 18 years ago now. That.
And her dad is Larry Saunders, who's a Northern Soul and rare groove hero himself.
Right.
So, do you know, you're reading some of those names now, and I've missed them out in the intro in the programme, you know. I'm sure I've not put
No, I
Adriana.
put them in.
Did you?
I put them back in.
Did you?
Yeah.
But yeah, Adriana was amazing, wasn't she? Absolutely fantastic.
So we have had those newer school artists like Adriana Frank McComb and Rassam Patterson, Trina Broussard. As well as the old school. There's been a mixture, hasn't there? Over the years? I think
A
it's
great
worked well.
mixture. I mean, I'm just looking. So one of my favourites. I'm going to talk about Kenny Burke for a second.
Oh, yes.
Sort of Kenny Burke and the Valentine Brothers show for me was a real highlight.
With Sherry Brown as three of them.
Sherry
Brilliant,
Brown,
yeah.
That was a great show. That, but I just remember Kenny being late coming down, and he was staying in a hotel here, right? And so I'm stood at the side of the stage, and Ian's going, "He's not here. What are we going to do?" The Valentine Brothers had only got a handful of songs that they were singing. And he's going, you're going to have to fill for a minute. I said, well, what am I going to do? I can't go and tell jokes. I'm not that kind of guy. So I'm thinking here, how am I going to do this now? So I went back on the stage and I just picked up the mic and I went, if you think that you're going to have waited all these years to see you sing Money's Too Tight to Mention, if you think you're going to get away without singing it twice, you've got another thing coming. Get back on the stage. And I made them sing it again. Right.
Fantastic.
There's always a reason why certain things happen or don't happen, or reasons that things are. In Kenny's case, Kenny can't do adrenaline.
Right, okay.
And so when he was performing here in any show he doesn't want to be around the audience and feel that kind of buzz. He wants to come from his room, straight on the stage, and then leave. And he said, it made it quite clear. He said, I'm not going to be hanging in the green room. I'm not going to be watching the other acts. He doesn't want to get wound up by that whole excitement by the audience. Tell me when I'm on. I'll come down at the stage. And then I think you went to his room, didn't you?
Yeah, I had to bring him down the back way.
But he was banging on the door, I think. He didn't hear you at the door. He was in the bathroom or something like that happened. But it wasn't like he was just late. It was just there was that reason for it. So I just thought I'd throw that in. There's usually a reason for everything.
Yeah, there really is. But I mean, what are your highlights? I mean, let's start with you, Richard. What's, out of everything, if I could pinpoint you to one particular highlight, what would it be?
Well, I suppose, I hope I'm not stealing Ralph's thunder here, but Chapter 8 would be the highlight for me, because just the incredible skill to put the band back together again, which is what Ralph did. I mean, they weren't even performing. The Capitol deal had run out. They'd gone their own separate ways. In fact, Ralph will correct me. I think it was they hadn't seen each other for about 20 years before they sat down for dinner on the Thursday night, as they'd all flown in from various parts of the States. And Michael Powell, of course, the ace producer and songwriter, was part of that entourage. So that was very special. And the lead singer, Gerald Lyles, did a bit of an impromptu set in the lounge as well. So that sticks in my memory. And taking them with Ian for fish and chips up on the front there at Harry Ramsden's, it was snow on the ground, I seem to remember that year as well. Yeah. And Michael Powell saying about mushy peas, smashed peas.
Yeah, smashed peas.
So that sticks out in my mind as being, something that could never happen again. And Chapter 8 now are reformed in America, but it's not the same people. They're just no original members.
I remember
so that was brilliant.
Standing next to Michael Powell while he was playing on the side of the stage, thinking, Jesus, that's Michael Powell. And you think, hang on, what's going on here? It's like the middle of winter in Blackpool, and that's Michael Powell.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that was a real highlight for me.
What about you, Ralph?
Well, I'm proud of all the reunions. I mean, Richard's mentioned Chapter 8, but the fact we had One Way together with Alicia Myers and Al Hudson.
Who also never nearly got here, did he? There was an issue with his passport, apparently, or something, or he couldn't get out of the country.
The passport was actually Gerald Lars, actually.
Yeah,
Oh, was it?
That was
Right.
right to the wire, wasn't
Oh, was
it?
it?
That-
Right.
Yeah, he found
Yeah.
out, by the way, that he had a child that he never knew existed as a result of us trying to get his work permit.
Right.
And there was alimony.
Wow.
With his, we had to sort all that out.
Was he happy about finding out about that child? Was
But,
that
well, I don't remember. But
No, I don't mean it in
I
a
remember
funny way.
Michael
But
Powell had to get a lawyer to sort it all out
Right.
on Gerald's behind. He hadn't spoken to Gerald in decades, but there he was sorting that all out. But this, and the one way Alicia Myers, they hadn't been in the UK and stood on the same stage with Alicia Myers for about 40 years.
Yeah.
And then you've got Atlantic Star.
Yeah.
Now, Atlantic Star, there is a version of Atlantic Star touring America now, but it's new members. And one thing I always insist upon is having at least the original voices of these groups that we bring over. And I thought, we've got to have Sharon Bryant,
Yeah.
you know.
Did you
doing
try and get Barbara as
Circles,
well?
and I'll come on to Barbara, but doing Circles When Love Calls.
Yeah.
Certain songs that Sharon did, needed her in the building, and she hadn't been here for 25 years, or sung with Atlantic Star for 25 years. Now, the Barbara Weathers side of it, we could have had Barbara and Sharon on their own, but then we couldn't have used Atlantic Star,
Right.
and we couldn't afford to have everybody. We could have just had Barbara as well, but the fee, and that's always a consideration, was just too much. But for me, it is the reunions. It is bringing these artists over that people have never seen before, and may not actually, see again. I mean, Kashif's a classic example of that.
Yeah.
Kashif was supposed to be doing something Richard and I were doing at Fleetwood at Soul Togetherness, and he didn't show.
No.
And I felt so bad because Kashif was on expansion, and I was technically responsible for him coming in.
He had asthma, I think, didn't he? Bad asthma.
And I said to Kashif, I said, we'd like you to do Luxury Soul. I said, but you have to come, because it's nerve-wracking if an artist suddenly pulls out. I said, don't say you're going to come and then pull out. If you're going to come, you say you're going to come, you've got to come. And he did come, and he was brilliant, and people did appreciate it. But no one would have known that like 12 weeks later he'd passed away. Yeah.
I found the contract the other day with his signature on. I kept it in my file.
Well, I'm like that with Ashford and Simpson. I've
Right.
got their signature, and all Kenny Burke
Yeah.
and Al
Yeah,
McLean.
yeah.
Rock. I've got all the
I don't blame
all
you.
in my secret file, private file at home.
What about you, Ian?
I'm going to be. It's a little bit more cheesier. This, I think, the response, but it's genuine. And I think that my highlights are every single year.
No, get off.
No, seriously, on a Friday afternoon or early evening when people are checking in.
Right. Is that a relief, though?
No, it's not. Honestly, it's still a disbelief that the fact that it's still going ahead and it's still, creating so much love, passion, enjoyment, happiness, with regards to people like, they haven't seen it's their sort of reunion themselves. I know you were talking about artist reunion. I'm talking about, the guests. They don't see each other. They see each other, one weekend in the year. But just having that and having the, that sort of confidence and the gratitude for the team that we've got behind Luxury Soul Weekend. From everyone that helps on wristbanding,
Yep.
Nicola,
Ethna,
thank you,
yeah.
Glenn. And in the early days, obviously Judith,
Yes,
Gail,
that's right.
Noel used
Yeah.
to do it in the early days. But everyone, it's just ace. The whole event is a highlight.
So this is its 20th year this year in its form, and the show tonight. Cornell C.C. Carter, who did a gig with at Boysdale about 6 months ago, and it's the first time I'd seen him live. By God, that man is a class act. So he's on tonight, and also Alton McLean, fantastically brilliant, and of Rocky Robbins, of course, who's also released you've released a couple, or licensed a couple of records via Expansion to get out.
Yes, I mean, we made some records with him back in the late 80s. Yeah. He came to the UK and did a PA tour. And he came up to the northwest, didn't he?
He did. He was at one of Alex Lowe's events. The one and only one he did in Morecambe,
Right.
which I think was an old prison, which then became a holiday camp. And Rocky was there that night.
Yeah.
That sounds like some of Alex's events, doesn't it?
I think he moved straight onto Southport after that.
Yeah.
And he was an artist that people were asking me about. What's ever happened to Rocky? Why can't we see Rocky? But he wasn't on social media at all until about 2018, 2019. And through a producer, Ricky Peterson, who was on Facebook, I said, do you know where Rocky is? And Ricky put me in touch with Rocky. And the next thing, we've got to do something. Found out he had an album in the can. It hadn't been released, like a new album. And so I immediately snapped that up for expansion. Then found out there was a whole unreleased A&M album recorded in 1983, which I was sent the audio to and shared with a couple of people, and they went all crazy for that. Next minute, I think I've got to do something. So I brought him to London, and we did the show at the Jazz Cafe, which was so terrific. I'm thinking, well, it's obvious we've got to bring him and showcase him in Blackpool.
So as we move out of this year's event, the 20th anniversary, next year. 20 years for Birmingham, but also the 21st anniversary for this one. So it comes of age next year. So
it does. That's a nice
there's
way of
always anniversaries to celebrate. Of course there are.
Yeah.
And it's also 50 years of Wigan Casino this year as well.
Of course it is. Yeah, that's
very important.
Yeah,
but yeah. So this Blackpool event comes of age next year. So what's going to be exciting about next year now? So have you got some ideas for artists and so on?
I don't really start thinking about artists until I'm driving home.
Yeah, but we have already discussed a couple of people.
People mention to us, opportunities that we're presented with to think about. There's always those.
Yeah. Have you got a wish list though?
I guess.
I mean, can you share any of those with us, or would you like to just keep those quiet? I mean, or is it just like in an ideal world?
It's in an ideal world.
In an ideal world, if I said to you, who would you ideally like to book? Who would it be?
Well, I'd say Jeffrey Osborne.
And I would say Jeffrey Osborne.
And I'd say Jeffrey Osborne.
But and how do you get him out? How do you A, get him off the golf course, and B, get him into the UK? I mean,
Yeah, it's just...
And Stephanie Mills.
Some of these artists can still...
But Stephanie Mills and Will Downing, interestingly, tour together a lot in America, don't they? Do this little double-up thing,
Right.
Where they use the same band and everything. And,
but they often want to bring their whole band to the UK.
Well, I know from our conversations at Jazz FM when we wanted to talk about Will Downing, and and he wanted all his American band over. I mean, I know that you managed to pull a coup off at the Ritz, didn't you, with Snake Davis?
Yes, yeah. Was that with Snake Davis?
Snake Davis's band, Right. And Will Downing came and did that in
I
Manchester.
remember
That was a great gig.
It was a good gig. It was a Sunday night, wasn't it? Yeah.
But that, I mean, I always think that he would be one that I'd love to see here, because he would captivate that room completely, and he would just, he'd blow it away.
He can still hold a significant, not only a significant note, but also a significant price in the market in America.
Yeah.
It's a high-end booking. Up there with Chaka Khan and that league of
When you think when we started off, the exchange rate was 180 or 190 or 2, and now it's 120. And of course the Americans don't want to factor that in their negotiations. They work in dollars, so that we've got to try very hard not to overstep the mark and end up having to suddenly make our package price 25-30% higher than it would normally be, just to have the artists that we might all dream of just for 1 hour. But having said that, our ambition's very high for these artists, and we can and we will always come up with a great package.
I'm going to throw in Kenny Lattimore, actually.
As
another artist I would love to see. Often, I mean, I met Kenny Lattimore. I've spoken to him about it, and he was very excited. But then you've got to deal with management, and that's often a different situation. An artist might come across as really enthusiastic and keen and love the whole idea, and it will be management that say, well, he ain't come in coach class, and he wants this and that, and the demands put on us by management will often.
And I suppose you're also limited by the venue as well, aren't you? Really, because
it's
in terms of capacity,
of course it is.
Because if I remember having a conversation with somebody once about the Love Supreme Festival, and it was the first year that it was going ahead, and there was a little group of us talking about who should be booked for that, and 3 or 4 of us, myself, Simon Cook, and a couple of other people, we all said book Prince. That was what we just said. And he said it'll cost £1 million, and we were all going, well, but you'll get your money. It's a big field. People will buy the tickets, and they would have done. There's no doubt about it. So if you weren't limited by the capacity, I suppose, where you knew that you could sell more tickets, you could probably spend a little bit more and bring those artists like Chaka Khan, for instance, or whatever. But
the room also has certain limitations. It's a concert. It's a function room in a hotel. It's not a concert venue. And some artists with their rider will insist on certain equipment and even bring their own sound engineer, who won't understand the room as well as our own sound engineers, because they've done it for 20 years. They know exactly how to kit that room out. And I'm trying to explain that to an artist that, no, leave it with us. They don't want to. You might remember with Eric Benet, by the way, that they brought their own
Yeah.
sound equipment.
Yeah.
They could. That hotel was big enough to accommodate that, and we did it.
Yeah.
And do you remember that sound
I
desk?
do.
they
I
had?
remember
was like
it.
something out of
Huge. It was
NASA's
like,
space,
yes, absolutely.
space
Yeah.
station.
Yeah. It was like some of this should
Yeah,
have
it
been
was Star
stuck in
Trek.
the middle
Yeah.
of a field at Glastonbury.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
it was brilliant. What about you, Ian? I like, you know, in terms of artists, don't say Bananarama.
Do you know something? And this is why we've got such a great sort of relationship, because I just don't have any influence in this, because these guys just, I trust them, and
Leave
they
it to
deliver
us.
year in, year out. And they just say, by the way, this is who it is. This is when we're going live. This is what they need. This is what we have to do with the hotel. Right, fine, done.
Well, after 20 amazing years, long may it continue for the next 20 years.
Thank you.
It's an honour to be involved in this event. As I say, it's my 12th this year, so and it's a very, you know, from a DJ's point of view, it's an event. I get asked, how do you get onto that? Can you put me in touch with Richard Searling? And he's like, say, look, it's not bloody easy to break into this at all. You know, I got lucky through fortunate events to be able to do this, and I'm thankful that you keep asking me to come back. But you know, it isn't easy to get in, because, as you mentioned before, you've got a very settled crew.
We have. I'm loyal to those.
If I was being really honest, I'd like to see a few more women on the lineup. You know, I
Yeah.
actually would. I'd look at that sometimes, and I think actually maybe there's a bit of gender disparity there.
That's mentioned at several events at the
Yeah.
moment, and I'm trying, certainly on the Northern Soul events, to engineer that. But you're right, it's worth thinking about. It's who do you leave out then? That's
the thing,
it's
isn't
the old
it? Yeah, of
football
course,
team
yeah.
management, isn't it,
Yeah.
really?
We got Vivi on the lineup. I don't know
We
that.
have.
Yeah, of course.
Vivi was
Yeah,
smashing
Vivi.
it last night
Yeah,
in
she
spring.
was.
She was absolutely
Yeah, she's-
brilliant.
And we missed her last year, unfortunately,
Yes.
because she couldn't come
That's
across.
right,
Did she? Was she
that's
poorly
right.
or something?
Yeah, and then COVID the year before that. So
Yeah,
that's
we
great.
wrote-
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, but listen, thank you very much. So long may it continue, and let's look forward to the 21st anniversary.
Yes, indeed.
As your child becomes an adult.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm going to keep going on about this Birmingham thing, because I think it needs to be done.
Yeah, well, you know, it's not something we're going to ignore. So leave it with us. So
Yeah,
thank you, Mike.
absolutely.
It's been lovely speaking
No, it's great
to
talking
you.
to you, Richard Searling.